After the Supreme Court declined to hear the New York City case against the rent stabilization law of 2019, landlords are now facing foreclosure due to that law. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the real life foreclosure filing of a New York City landlord who suffered so badly due to the 2019 rent stabilization law that they're losing properties and that they are facing complete financial ruin. And this is just a small microcosm of what's happening all over the city with different landlords, and it goes over just how much less in value these properties hold now. So there's a lot of landlords, they paid significantly more for these properties than what they are currently worth. And that's a bad thing. It's a very bad thing. I know a lot of tenants, they're like, oh, we don't care if landlords, their properties are foreclosed upon. We don't care if these properties are, or if the landlords go bankrupt, right? But the banks, when they take these properties back, people aren't buying them. Okay, landlords, other landlords, they don't want them because they realize there's no opportunity there for them to make money. And banks, they're awful landlords. They will not do repairs on time and they just won't care. They just won't care. So what you'll see is you'll see properties that are already falling into disrepair right now. Well, it's going to get even worse. Okay, it's going to be just awful for the tenants who live in these properties. And what's the ultimate goal for these tenants? They want to have safe, clean, and affordable housing, right? Well, they're going to have affordable, but the safe and clean part is what they're not going to have. And that's unfortunate, okay? You can't have these things when you're sitting there and you're telling the landlords, well, you have zero opportunity to make a profit, zero, okay? In fact, if you take ownership of these buildings, you're going to lose money the entire time that you own them. And that's what's happening right now. And this is an interesting story because it goes over the problems that this specific landlord faced as they, sat there and they tried to survive. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So do you believe there's going to be widespread or at least a lot more bankruptcies within the landlord and the real estate market, especially when we're talking about rent stabilized and rent controlled buildings within New York City? Okay. I believe that that will be the case. And, the city will not be able to do anything until they change their laws. Okay, they're going to have to change their laws and allow these landlords to be able to increase their rents. Otherwise, they're just going to see more and more of this sort of thing happening. Okay, and that's the truth. They can sit there and they can, oh, this isn't right. The people can't afford it. But they can sit there and whine and complain all they want. But all you're going to see is more landlords going bankrupt, more properties falling into disrepair, units sitting empty because it's cheaper to keep them empty than fixing them up and then putting tenants in them. I mean, you're just going to see more and more and more of this same stuff the more that, or the longer that they keep these laws on the books. So anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from therealdeal.com and it says pre-foreclosure filings slam a rent stabilized landlord city skyline. Defaults top $100 million on 11 buildings in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx. Yeah, and this is a real life story. So this is what happens when you have a law that gives you absolutely no opportunity to be able to turn a profit. Okay. So anyway, let's get into the article. Rent stabilized heavyweight City Skyline just took another punch. After defaulting on loans tied to 5 rent regulated buildings this summer, the firm, headed by Douglas Peterson, was hit by pre foreclosure filings from Fannie Mae on 11 buildings in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx, court records show. Peterson's latest defaults total $72 million, bringing the firm's distressed debt to $108 million. There's about one third. That's about one third of City Skyline's $316 million portfolio, according to Landlord Tracker, Who Owns What. So about a third of this company's properties are, I mean, they're in pre-foreclosure right now, and it's very likely that they're going to lose them. Okay, and that might be part of their strategy at this point. Let the bank take them back because they are losing so much money on them that it would be better for the company if they lost these properties, and maybe they might be able to survive with the other properties. But it's also likely that, hey, they could end up the whole thing just collapsing and this whole company going down. And that's, not what we want to see right now. The buildings listed in the pre foreclosure complaint are also rent stabilized. About half of the portfolio's 302 units are rent regulated, tax records show. The city skyline buildings named in the pre foreclosure filings are, and then they go through like a list of the different addresses. Not important for the purpose of me going over this article, right? So they said about half of this company's portfolio was rent stabilized. And I wouldn't doubt for 1 second that only the buildings that are under rent stabilization are the ones that they are allowing to go into pre foreclosure. Meanwhile, they're trying to hold on to those properties where they still can set the rents themselves and they can actually turn a profit. Okay, that's what I would do. Otherwise, your entire company is going to collapse. But, like I said, there aren't as many people out there who want to be rent control or rent stabilized landlords right now because they know of the issues they're facing. They know that they won't be able to raise their rents to keep pace with the inflation. And they know that, you know, simply put, things are only going to get worse. They're only going to get worse for the landlords out there who are operating these buildings. So they're going to put more regulations on them. The city's going to be coming after them more often. And, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? Now, I know that in the past, a lot of landlords were depending upon appreciation in order to make up for the fact that, hey, we aren't making a lot of money or any money off of the rents. So that isn't the case anymore. And actually, these property values have declined, and they've declined a lot. Okay. And that's, I think they talk about that going down a little bit further in the article. So let's continue. City Skyline could not be reached for comment. Brokers reported signs of rent stabilized distress early this year as owners exposed to the decaying assets began to buckle under the one-two punch of the 2019 rent law and rising expenses, especially interest rates. The legislation effectively capped rents on stabilized apartments. Inflation, along with the pandemic's hit to rent rolls, a bungled rent relief program, an eviction moratorium, a cancel rent campaign, and rising interest rates have made it impossible for some landlords to make their mortgage payments. Yeah, and that's the truth right there. And they go over all of the different factors of why I believe that we're going to see a lot more foreclosures, a lot more bankruptcies of landlords. And I'm not talking just about New York here, okay? That's something that, like the rent control right there, it is destroying landlords in a place like New York, right? But this is going to be seen all throughout the country as well because landlords all over they faced the bungled rent relief program where basically rent relief was put out but they didn't get reimbursed. Okay, and the eviction moratorium all throughout the country, landlords face that eviction moratorium nonsense. Okay, the cancel rent campaign, well, that there's tenants everywhere who are, they're forming unions, they are trying to pressure their landlords, etc. I mean, I've heard about it in Kansas City where I invest. And then, of course, the rising interest rates. And this is a big one because a lot of landlords, they are forced to refinance because, they bought theirs with a, like maybe 5 years and then a bubble afterwards. Okay. So you basically have to refinance after a few years. And some of those landlords are falling into the point right now where they're being forced to refinance those properties. But when they're going up and refinancing, they're paying interest rates that are double what they were paying before. So suddenly the numbers don't work when you have a much, much higher interest rate. And so, yeah, this is a nightmare. All these things combined, and then you throw rent control, rent stabilization on top of that in New York City. And guess what? Recipe for disaster. Okay. They talk about how the commercial real estate market right now is very, very volatile due to the fact that, hey, people were working from home and basically downtowns, the commercial real estate sector, office space has not recovered. And they don't know if it will recover or how long it will take to recover. I think it'll recover, but it could be 10 plus years down the line. Okay. I mean, it takes a long time for cycles in the real estate market to change. Okay. So Yeah, I mean, if they are struggling so bad in the office sector, it's also a possibility that we could be seeing the same things happening in the residential sector. And this is just bad news for everyone, especially for the landlords up in New York City. But like I said, New York has to start working on changing its laws. There needs to be people put in positions of power who actually understand that, hey, doing this stuff, it's bad for business. It's bad for business. And what's bad for business, what it does is it drives businesses out. And that doesn't help the tenants, the workers, the people who live in the city who depend upon those businesses and those landlords and that housing. It doesn't help them at all.